There are several different types of people in your audience, and you need to be aware of who they are, how they work, what they think about. And maybe this time you're thinking, yeah, Tim, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about visual, audio, and kinesthetic. Maybe you haven't heard about visual, audio, and kinesthetic. If you haven't, there are three types of people. People who respond mostly to visual things, things they see. And then there are people who respond to audio things, things they hear. And people who respond to kinesthetic things, that is, things they can touch. And so in your speech, you have to make sure you have something for all three. So make sure they can see something when they're up there. Make sure you have some sort of vocal variety going on for people hearing. And ideally, making sure you have something people can fill out or sign or doodle on or do some sort of things with their hands. And that'll take care of the kinesthetic people. And that's okay as far as that goes. But did you know that even if you aren't talking about visual things, even if you aren't talking about auditory things, things you hear, if you aren't talking about kinesthetic things, those three types of people are still out there. And when you're giving your speech, you need to be aware of those three different types of people. Because not only are they interested in either visual or auditory or kinesthetic, in seeing things or hearing things or in touching things, they also have particular ways that they hear and pay attention to things that happen in your speech. And if you don't have something that addresses their issues, then they're not as involved, they're not as interested, their attention will just kind of drift off somewhere. And you won't know why. And perhaps this has happened to you in speeches where you're talking and you start thinking, geez, they're not paying attention. I'm doing visual stuff and they're writing things down, but for some reason they're not really focusing in and paying attention on what's going on here. And maybe that's because you haven't really focused in on what their needs are as an audience beyond simply seeing things and hearing things and touching things. And maybe now you're confused and thinking, Tim, what was visual people do and audio people do and kinesthetic people do aside from see, hear, and touch? I mean, that's what the word means, literally. Visual, seeing, and audio, hearing, and kinesthetic, touching. Well, it turns out that people who have these different capabilities of primarily focusing on their seeing, or primarily focusing on their hearing, or primarily focusing on touching, these people also have a different way that they best respond in a presentation. And if you're not aware of that, your presentation can fall apart. You may not be aware why it's happening. You just know that it is happening. And you see it happening and say, well, what's going on? Why is this happening? Maybe it's because a visual, audio, or kinesthetic person just isn't being keyed in, just isn't really getting involved. So today you will find out a little bit more about an approach you can use that will make the visual, the audio, and the kinesthetic people more engaged, more interested, more involved, and really more thoughtful about your speech. You'll find a way to kind of pull them in and bring them in and get them really aware of and thinking about what you're doing and what you're saying up there. So that's what you're going to learn right now. People who are kinesthetic are certainly interested in touch. touch is very important. No question about it. But there's also a mental capacity. There's a way that they think, a way that things go on in their brains that go along with that touch, along with the physical needs to kind of touch and grasp something and really get it entirely. There's also a mental thing there too. And it's important to understand that when you're giving your speech. If you give a speech more appropriate to a visual person, to a kinesthetic person, it's just going to go whizzing right over them. You don't want that to happen. The same way if they're kinesthetic, you give more of an auditory speech, it's really not going to impact them. You have to reach them where they are, the area of touch. And sure, you get them when they're writing something down. Hey, that's what they're doing. But they're not writing something down, when they're not taking notes, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them interested and pulled in to what's going on? And that's a challenge. Challenge every speaker has in really getting people engaged. What happens is you go up there and you do something and you see it's not quite going right, and you start thinking, whoa, that's not quite working. I don't know why. I seem to be doing everything right. I seem to be up here and everything seems to be going okay, but somehow that connection isn't being made. And so, in doing that and missing that connection, there's a challenge there. And that may have to do with dealing with kinesthetic people. People who respond by touch. Because of course, people who respond by touch can't actually touch you. In fact, if you're up on a stage and people are physically touching you, usually that's a bad sign. You might want to leave that place that you're speaking at, because if people are groping you while you're on stage, unless you're a rock star of some sort, and even then, probably a bad idea. It's why rock stars have bouncers and security guards in front of the stage to make sure that the kinesthetic people, I guess, can't get up and start touching them. But if you're going to get things by kinesthetically, and you can't touch somebody, and a kinesthetic person may think, well, geez, I can't touch them. I'm not writing things down. What's really going to engage me? And that goes back to the whole idea of what does it mean to be interested in touching things, interested in really writing things down? What does that have to do with the mindset? And it's really about a deliberate mindset. If you're a kinesthetic person, you have a very slow, deliberate, gradual mindset. So if somebody starts a speech like this and goes ripping other things off and all things talking like this, kinesthetic people are like, whoa, slow down there, dude. Way too much energy. So if you're giving a speech, you want to start out with lower energy in that speech. Now you can build up to higher energy later, but for the kinesthetic people out there, too much energy will just blow them away at the beginning. You may think, well, what about the auditory people, the visual people? Well, the good news is even if you start at low energy, they'll come along for the ride and they'll just see where it goes. You won't fully engage them, but they aren't completely disengaged. Whereas kinesthetic people, if you start rushing out, rah, they'll just, whoa, be gone. So you don't want to scare them off. Sort of like pigeons in a way. Apologize if you're a kinesthetic person, you're being compared to a pigeon, but this is pigeons, you have to kind of be careful, they're just going to all fly off. So as kinesthetic people, you have to gradually reach into things, and that means dialing your energy down, keeping the energy low, speaking deliberately and calmly to get that point across. So you start out dealing with the kinesthetic people, the touchy-feely people, by keeping things deliberate and slow, with a more gradual, deliberate energy in your speech. So okay, that's the kinesthetic people. Maybe you're wondering, Tim, what about the auditory people? How about them? How do you really engage them fully? Well, they're a little different. Kinesthetic people you can engage with a very low energy, and if you start your speech out with low energy, then Actually, that's good because then you have a place to go, you have a place to build, and more importantly, it also pulls in the kinesthetic people. So two benefits. One is you can go somewhere with it, and also is that it pulls people in and gets them involved. Kinesthetic people get engaged, and the auditory people and the visual people will come along later. Now, the auditory people is a little bit different because, of course, instead of having to touch things, they have to hear things. So if you're giving a speech and you're kind of mumbling, or you're not clear, or you're sort of rambling on, whatever, that's not going to get the auditory people. Auditory people are going to respond to things like vocal variety, different sounds, run back and forth. It's all about auditory. So that's just a natural thing to do. Make sure when you speak, you got some highs, some lows, some middles. And that's good so far as that goes. But you won't always have that sort of thing going on. You won't always have dramatic bangs and booms to capture in the auditory people. So similar to the kinesthetic people, you got to figure out, okay, now we get the auditory people. Where are they going to come in? What's going to engage them? What's going to get them involved? And just think about it, okay? You got people and they respond to sound, and they don't have to write things down, but they have to clearly hear what you say. But it's not quite the same thing as the kinesthetic people because they don't have to touch things or write things down. So it's all about hearing and being clear in hearing, and mentioned having some vocal variety. And then if you do that, you say, okay, that's going okay. But there's a little bit more to it. While the kinesthetic people are low energy, all about the energy being low, the auditory people are a little different. So if you start your speech kinesthetically, by the time you get into your speech, you want to make sure you start engaging somebody else. So you don't want to keep your speech at low energy all the time. And that's why you switch from kinesthetic into a more auditory type of way. Something that'll get the auditory people and pull them in, and they have different needs and different wants. Provided, of course, you're speaking clearly, very important to speak clearly, then you're getting along and the auditory people are saying, okay, I'm with you. But the other thing the auditory people need is a little bit higher energy. So the kinesthetic people are very low energy, slow and deliberate. By the time you get to auditory energy, it's got to be a little bit higher energy. A little bit higher, a little bit more of an oomph to it. And that will get the auditory people kind of cue them in. It's sort of like the kinesthetic energy is kind of going along like this. And the auditory people don't even notice it because they're up here. And then boop, then the auditory people, okay, higher energy, great. And all of a sudden, auditory people are like, wow, okay. Somebody's talking, they're saying something, I get it. They just become kind of aware as time goes on that that's what's going on. And it's about getting a little bit of higher energy. A little bit more energy, a little bit more push, a little more place for the thing to go. And that higher energy is what the auditory people need. Because when you're hearing things, you're listening to things, you really have to be aware at a little bit higher level. If you touch something and you have to write it and you write it down, that's very basic, very physical, very slow and deliberate. But auditory, a little bit faster. Definitely a little bit faster. Not too fast, because if you start stumbling over your own words, that's not good. It's not going to make the auditory people happy. But faster, higher energy, a little bit more push, some vocal variety, back and forth, maybe some dialogue and some sort of a dialogue back and forth, and that'll get the auditory people there and saying, okay, yeah, we're starting to get somewhere with this speech. Great, I'm in with it. I'm down with it. Great, let's keep it going. So all right, we have the kinesthetic people, lower energy, and the auditory people, a little higher energy. Now we come to the visual learners. With the kinesthetic people, you have to start really slower, more deliberate, more calmer, slower, more carefully, and kind of plod that energy along to make sure they're really feeling and sensing and getting a touch for everything you're saying. But then with the auditory people, you start to kick it up a notch. A little bit higher energy, a little bit more push, a little bit more things going on there, especially with vocal variety, with back and forth. And the auditory people are thinking, hey, okay, yeah, we're getting this. Something's coming along, I get it. It's sort of interesting, I'll pay attention. It's got some ups and downs. So the auditory people get involved, a little bit higher energy. And then you have the auditory people get involved, and they're there. The next challenge comes the visual people. These are the people that need to see things. These are the people that need to see what's going on, really important for them to see and understand stuff. They're just listening to it, they'll miss things. They'll wonder about, well, what does it really look like? These are the people who don't want podcasts. They want to have YouTube. They want to have YouTube so they can see the person there, they can see what they're doing on stage. This is really important for them to be able to understand it, to be able to process it. And so the visual people are a little bit different from the auditory and the kinesthetic people. The visual people have to see things, see what's going on. But the thing about seeing things is there's just so much to see. Maybe you've heard that expression, there's so much to see. And that's kind of the visual way. There's just so much to see and so much information there going on. There's kind of a flood of information going on with the visual people. With the auditory people, it's a little bit less, and the kinesthetic people less than that, but with the visual people, it's just a flood of sensory, visual information just streaming at it. In fact, if you think about things like sound, light is much faster than sound. So naturally, the people who deal with sound are a little bit lesser energy than the people who deal with light and visual things. Everything's got to be much different. So you're dealing with sound, you're here, dealing with visual, it's that whole dealing with things outside you, dealing with everything you can see, and there's just so much to see. When you hear things, you can focus your attention on the voice. When you see things, there's just so much stuff going on all around you, like, whoa, look at that, or look at that, or look at that, or look at that, or look at that, look at that. I mean, just think about your day and looking around you and seeing all the stuff around you, and it's like, wow, there's so much visual information. And because of that, visual people are naturally much higher energy people. They're the big gesture people, the huge gesture people. They're up, they're out, they're going, they're gone. It's kind of how they are. Because there's so much information going along, in order to get visual people's attention, you've got to say, hey, over here, I'm over here on stage. And if you don't have something like that going, visual people are like, oh man, yeah, you're kind of interesting, but oh, look at that over there, and look at that over there. And maybe you've seen visual people, they just kind of dart around from place to place, and they keep on looking at everything all around them. Now granted, people today a lot of times are looking at their cell phones all the time, but when they're not doing that, visual people will tend to look around them and see all the different things going on. So in order to keep their attention, you got to keep the energy high. You got to keep things moving. You got to keep everything in your speech going along, coming along. People say, okay, yeah, all right, I get it. And as long as you got stuff going on up here, some sort of movement or gesture or whatever is fine, but also the energy. The energy has to be much higher, much stronger, more powerful. It has to really kick in and get that energy going. So you have to have a kind of a high energy once you get to the visual part. So for the visual people, it's really all about getting that energy up, keeping that energy up, making sure you got strong energy all the way through, and keeping that energy up will enable you to make that connection and drag it in. You say, hey, over here, this is all about, what you're supposed to be listening to. This is it. People say, well, I think there's something going on over there. I'll pay attention over there. Yeah, I see something happening over there. And in addition to doing it with your body, you can just do it with your energy. Your overall energy, body energy is up, very strong, very powerful. That's what the visual is all about, keeping that visual energy up. So you get kinesthetic and the audio, but by the time you get visual, your energy is high, and it stays high. You may have heard that there are different types of audience, particularly visual, audio, and kinesthetic. And they each type of audience has a different way to do things. Instead of, although quite often it's talked about in terms of visual, audio, and kinesthetic, quite often everybody says that. When you actually present, you present actually the other way. First you deal with the kinesthetic people. Slower, more deliberate energy. You really want things to sink in. You want them to feel things. Big pauses. So things sink in. Let it really sink in and get those people engaged. And then after that, the kinesthetic, comes the auditory people. A little bit higher energy, a little bit faster, a little more vocal variety, a little bit more back and forth. And then the auditory people say, hey, something's going on up there. Let's pay attention. And bringing that higher energy up, making that higher energy go, will bring people in and get them more engaged in what you're saying up there. They're like, hey, okay, all right, I understand it. I get what's going on. The auditory people need to have a little bit higher energy, vocal variety, of course. Say something in different ways, in different tones, different textures, and that's great. And then you bring in the visual people, and that's really high energy. You want to keep it going, you want to keep it flowing, keep things moving along. That's the whole thing about visual people. They're all thinking, okay, what do we got to see? And they're like, this. Again, we've talked about pigeons before, as far as you don't want to scare off the kinesthetic people with pigeons, but visual people, similar to like the pigeons, if you've ever seen pigeons looking, they're like, so much stuff going on, so much stuff to see. So for a visual person, you've got to keep the energy high, because how else are you going to keep their attention? There's so much stuff to see out there aside from you. They'll be paying attention to that sort of thing. Visual people is what YouTube is made for. They just say, oh man, look at this, and look at this, and look at this, and they got, visual after visual after visual going, just all sorts of different things to look at. Well, to compete against that, you got to have pretty high energy going all the way through, just cranking it all the way through your speech, cranking it all the way through your talk. When you do that, when you really get that high energy going, then the visual people start saying, oh, okay, yeah, there's something here. I'm going to pay attention to it. I'm going to see what's going on, and then see where that goes. So those are the three types of people. The kinesthetic people, the audio people, and the visual people. And by doing that, by really engaging people in that sort of earthy, sort of a solid kinesthetic way first, and then a little bit more of the auditory, a little bit more of the back and forth with the talking, great for higher, and then finally really high energy, got all the dramatic gestures and huge this and big that, gets the visual people, oh yeah, hey, oh great. And once you get all those three different types of your audience involved, the kinesthetic, the audio, and the visual, all of a sudden you get that massive connection to your whole audience, everybody out there. And everybody's thinking, yeah, this is interesting stuff. I'm going to pay attention to this. And once you start up there on stage and you feel that when you're going back and forth, you get that rapport with your audience. You feel, oh yeah, this is really what it's all about. You see those eyes trained on you. You see people nodding along. You see the kinesthetic people writing things down. You see the auditory people leaning closer to make sure they can hear everything you're saying. Well, then that's just when you know things are going well. Your audience will tell you when things are going well. Your audience will tell you that, oh yeah, that's working. That's really coming along, and keep on doing that, because that's really going the right way. And then you get that confidence, that certainty that you have up there, that awareness that, yeah, this is the way it should be. And as you're doing that, you have that enjoyment of just getting up in front of people and speaking and saying what you have to say in a way that you know you're going to change lives, change worlds, change everything, and just make things better and improve things by connecting with your audience, your whole audience, with the kinesthetic, with the audio, the visual, and you get that confidence, that certainty about you, and you just feel better. And as a speaker, you just look better at the audience and think, whoa, that guy up there knows what that guy's talking about. And that's just a great, great feeling. So you can go out there and speak. Remember your different audiences. And reconnect lower energy, kinesthetic, higher energy on the auditory, and finally really big energy on the visual.